So I'm going to show you today how I make a cast-on bonnet. Normally when I do a cast-on bonnet, I normally will do these with a contrasting color that I can write the number on, and then this top edge has got a fishing line on it, and then I just use up my yarn scraps on the bottom and attach a ring. But I'm going to show you a basic startup bonnet, just working with yarn. So I've already got my machine cast on. This happens to be a 64 cylinder. I'm going to remove my waste yarn cone here and add my project yarn. I'm going to start by just cranking about 10 rows. And I like to work this tail back in. So there's my 10 rows. Then I'm going to do a picot. So I'm going to take and pull one needle forward, pull that up and over to the adjacent needle, and go all the way around. Every other one is going to move over. So I'm just pulling that needle forward a little bit so I can get behind it and see that hole where I can easily grab. I'm doing every other needle. This yarn's a little fuzzy, so I don't always catch it all. You don't always need a startup bonnet to match the cylinder size. So for instance, if I'm working with a 54 cylinder, I could still use a 60 size bonnet or even a 72. The idea is you really want to get the weight equalized around the cylinder so that when you start it, it's equally weighted around it and pulling evenly. So you kind of have to fudge it a little bit if you're using the bigger one. I'm going to crank forward a little bit, and I can see these two didn't knit right away, so I'm just going to pull those bars up and over, and you're going to start to see that these are going to open up a little bit. Just continuing to go around, finishing the rest of my needles here. Oops. Wrong one. There's my last one. All right, so they're every other one. So as I crank around, you're going to see these little V's. Here's another one that didn't catch, so I'm going to just lift that over. And I'm going to go 10 more times. From here, I'm going to take my weights off so that I have better access to the bonnet here. And I'm going to fold this up. And so it's kind of probably going to be hard to see on the video, but I'm going to start to grab this very first stitch of where my project yarn began, and I'm going to hang it onto the needle. I'm going to go all the way around, putting all of those onto a needle. This is creating that hung hem. This is what you would also do if you were making a sock with a hung hem. Either with or without the picot. You wouldn't have to do a picot in there. So I'm just gently kind of pulling that out towards the needles and hooking it on. So I'm reaching the point I can't hook them on any further. So I'm going to add my weights. You'll see it pull down again. And I hold a little bit right here just because this doesn't have any weight. So I'm just going to press it down a little bit so that those will continue to knit. Take my weights off again. And continue to hang the rest of the stitches. Now where my yarn began, gets a little tricky because these like to hide underneath the waste yarn. You'll have to look for those a little bit. And here's my last one. So they're all hung now. Add my weights back on. I'm going to just gently push this down against the needles. Continue to crank around. Now they're all secured. Now from here, if I wanted to change to a different yarn, I could. I'm just going to continue to crank this. So it'll be all one color bonnet. And you can crank however many of your rows you would like, up to you. I usually go about 35 to 40, sometimes more or less, depending on how much yarn I want to get rid of. I think that's probably pretty good. I'm going to stop over here on the side and I'm going to create a long tail. So I'm just going to grab my yarn, pull it, get a nice long tail. I can set my project yarn aside. Come back to my waste yarn. So I'm going to run this for a few stitches with both the project yarn and the waste yarn, just to make sure that they're secured together and that I don't drop anything. Then I'm going to grab my project yarn and just pull it in and drop it down into the hole. From there, I can crank forward. remove my weights, gently pull down, crank forward, and there's my bonnet. So you can see these little picot edges that are along the top here. That's where we created those holes. And when I'm ready to hang this on the machine, there's a bar here in between. So that would be where I would hang on the new needle. So this is just using all yarn on these. So you can see this little bar. And to do the bottom, I just grab that long tail, I come around, I gather all of these stitches together, cinch them in, and you can see on this one how on the bottom it's all cinched in, and then I just add a middle ring just to make it easier to hang the weights, and you can write the number of the bonnet on there.